Tom, really appreciate you spending some time with me. You know, at Softway, we talk a lot about humanity and bringing humanity to the workplace. And I understand how I feel about it in terms of standard business workplaces, but being the inspiration from where we even got this concept, I've never had a chance to actually talk to you about what that really looks like for you, because you know you're not working in an office, you're on the field, you're with kids. How does, like, I really want to try to connect those two things. I'm just curious, when you think of humanity, something as big as that, do you see that on the workplace, and do you see that on the field, and how does that show up for you?
Yeah, I think there's different levels. Obviously, everything that happens on a football field in a locker room as part of a football team isn't perfectly translatable into the business world. But I do think when you talk about humanity, you're talking about caring. You're talking about genuinely having an emotional attachment to someone or something that that you have not only empathy, but you have the ability to connect. I think that's probably another good word that goes with humanity, is the ability to connect with the people that you work with, that work under you, that work above you, all of the above. But all of that takes time too, and an investment in these people. So I think it's certainly all of that is translatable. Honestly, I think it's a little bit more difficult in the business world, because you know, in football, we're dealing with young men that usually all kind of have a shared goal, right? Which is to win, right? When the team I think they all kind of understand when the team wins, we all win, right? Individually. And I don't know that it's, they're a lot more moldable at the age we get them, whether even in the pros, in their young 20s or whatever it is. You know, but in the business world, you're dealing with grown adults that have families and have been set in their ways for a long time, and the investment to kind of crack into what you need to be to have this humanity that we talk about, that's a lot of investment, and but it pays such big dividends in the end in terms of the health and productivity of your team.
You know, you used a word there. You actually used empathy, which I use a lot. But as I really process what that looks like, again, in the context that you came up in, what does like empathy play a role in sport or in teams?
Well, it's hard to walk the line between accountability and empathy, right? As a leader, it's the most perilous balancing act that I walk, at least, because in ultra successful organizations, there is an extremely high level of accountability from the ground up, from the janitor wanting to do his job the best, the CEO, to everybody in between. And so, and sometimes holding other people accountable becomes uncomfortable, right? And so to maybe alleviate some of that discomfort, I think we've got to bring empathy into it. That person has to feel like, and I know we're kind of diving into not unmet expectations, but if the standards aren't met, that person needs to feel like when I'm called out for that, or when that is made, you know, brought to my attention, if you will, that's coming from a place of understanding, of I get what you're going through, I get the obstacles that you faced, I get all of the things, all of the reasons for not meeting our standards. However, because I love you, I have to hold you to these standards, right? And you know, like a parent, it's for your own good kind of thing, right? And so, but in order for all of that to work, they have to know you care, right? They have to, not just know, they have to believe it, they have to feel it, and that takes time and investment.
Do you feel like if you were a CEO of a mid to large size company, do you think you'd do you think you'd do the coach mode thing, or is there anything you'd change if you were like all this empathy and this care? It's great, but I feel like on the field it shows up in a very like hardline way. Like you're tough on them and it's expected, and there's that culture that's built around that, and of course you infuse love underneath that. In the workplace, some would argue that there's sensitivities and other feelings and emotions, all this other stuff involved. I'm curious if you were CEO today, would you be Coach Herman, or would you think you'd have to make any adjustments?
I would be Coach Herman, certainly in beliefs, values. We have the luxury of being in sports much more militaristic maybe than the business world has, and it's just accepted, and it's kind of what you sign up for, and everybody's okay with it, and I love it that way. Trust me, I love it that way. So I think there needs to be expectations that are very well communicated at the front end, whether you're taking over a new team, whether new team members come in, like, this is how it's going to be here, and right, wrong, or indifferent, this is how we do it. Here's my resume if you want to see it. Like, it's worked. Like, we're going to be successful, and you are going to be successful doing it this way. But here are all of these things that I expect from you, or that this team expects from you. But also, here are all the things that I'm going to give you, that we are going to give you, to allow you to meet these standards. And so I think it's the hiding the medicine in the dog food kind of thing, right? You have to, much more so in the business world, the massaging of your tone and your messaging can be challenging, I would think, because for us it's just direct, and kind of but everybody knows, like, it doesn't mean coach doesn't love you. That doesn't mean, like, it just, we got to get a job done. It's boom, 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 boom. And, put your feelings aside, and we'll talk about our feelings another time.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the balance so many leaders struggle with, is that they know what they want, they know what they need to do. They even know what's best. But I think because of that eggshell walking that you're essentially describing, where it's like, you can't just be straight up. You have to.
It's becoming that way in locker rooms too. So, these kids are getting paid millions of dollars in college football, and yet they have the right to leave every year too. And so keeping them happy, right, is important. You've got a great player. I mean, great coaches aren't great coaches without great players. And so there's a lot more of that in today's college football than there was maybe 10 years ago. But yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's more control on their end, more power on their end. So you've got to be a lot more careful with feelings. I'd love it if we could coach a team full of robots. That'd be kind of cool. But
that kind of even matches the business world, though, in a sense. Even though obviously there's still hierarchy, but bosses and leaders are afraid to lose their best talent. They're afraid that that what they bring with them if they leave. So there is that little bit of held hostage to keeping them happy kind of feeling. And I think that does get in the way of them being genuinely honest sometimes, genuinely push them in ways they need to be pushed. Like, that balance is tough.
It is, but I've never, trust me, I've had kids we've had to kick off the team, like plenty of them. But I've never had one that believed in their core that I, as their leader, had their best interests in mind, that didn't eventually buy in. I had some that had a hard time trusting anybody, including me, and kind of kept doing their own thing, and you got to cut bait. But if they trust you, there's always going to be a way, right? Through good communication, through maybe some hard conversations, certainly, but there's always a way to improve, to repair relationships, to make things better. But it starts with that empathy and that caring and understanding. They're never, there's a saying in coaching, they don't they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? That you have to do that first. You have to.
And that's the secret sauce I really want to like extract from you, because it feels like in the business world, there's this comfort zone of sticking to like performance and metrics and just keeping it like we have systems built to keep it all really comfortable for everybody. And you're saying you've never had a kid that doesn't buy it once you get them to that trust. But I think that breaking through into that trust, like if you could simplify that process, what does that look like for you? Because it doesn't work for most people today to just, your trust just naturally keeps going down, because all you're doing is saying, hey, here's how you're performing,
right.
Here's your feedback, it's all work. It's like as if you went in the field and only thing you ever tell them is their tackle form, or
right.
like how.
No, yeah, I think one way, I went from being an offensive coordinator to where my position room, I coached the quarterbacks, had about 6 players, even the entire side of the ball, maybe 40 players, right? And so to be in the head coach where you've got 105 players under your charge, plus an entire coaching staff, plus a support staff, plus a recruiting staff, I mean, everybody you're in charge of. And so you kind of, when you become the head coach, you kind of rely on those assistant coaches a lot, because they're like your middle management a little bit. And those are the ones, I put a lot of time into those guys because of what I expected in terms of them putting the time in with the players as well. And so I think it's a shared vision on down, right? I think as a leader that can become overwhelming, especially the more people that report to you or that you're in charge of. It becomes very, very difficult to have those. I missed my relationships with the quarterbacks so much when I became a head coach, because I went from having 5 kids to 105 kids, right? And so you just can't have the intimate relationships that you want, that can build. And so where do I have those intimate relationships with? I have them with the coaches. And then those coaches then go disseminate the expectations and the standards. And
that's, I guess, that makes perfect sense, but that's where I'm most curious, is because now you got adults, you've grown men.
Yes.
Now we're talking about the same thing.
Right, yeah,
now,
the very same
so,
problem.
So they're doing a job, they're
right.
employees, and they kind of report to you. So like talk about, like, how do you get them true, like, now we're talking about just like in an office, these
Correct.
people have their own vision and ideas and expectations, and again, adults. So yeah, with the kids, makes perfect sense. All those things that make
right.
them passionate, and they signed up for they're trying to achieve something. And I'm not saying the assistant coaches don't have passion, but maybe different. And so how do you really get them rallied around your vision, rallied around the culture you want to build and truly believe, because that's the only way they're going to enable these other kids to follow along. They have to really be in sync with you.
Right.
And I think leaders want to know, how do I get, like, I see it all the time. You get CEOs surrounded by a C-suite that each are just in it for themselves, or each have their own idea of what should be right and wrong. How they would do anything to be able to build a team that shared
right.
their purpose and their vision. How did you do that?
Well, one, I think coaches get a bad rap for hiring friends, right? And certainly if that's the only qualification you have, is that you're buddies with a guy, that doesn't qualify you for the job. But I think to a certain degree, the amount of trust that a head coach places in those assistant coaches is enormous. And when I built my first staff at Houston, I wanted guys that I knew. They may be young, but you might not have heard of them, but I knew them, and I knew they believed the same things as me, this, that, and the other. Now, it's hard when you start either losing those guys, or you take another job, and you start having to hire guys maybe you know less and less about. And it was one of my downfalls at Florida Atlantic. It was a job that didn't pay well for the assistants, and I had to kind of go fish in a pond that I wasn't used to fishing in, and probably didn't hire maybe some of the best guys I could have. And so I learned that the relationships matter. Like, and obviously the person has to be qualified in all the other areas, but I think on the front end, hiring the right people in those middle management roles is extremely important. But then again, this is all very open and direct communication on the front end about, hey, I'm going to be very, demanding of you and your position group and your players, and I'm going to hold you responsible for everything from if he fails a math test to his mom's having problems with him to if he ran the wrong route, right, as a wide receiver. Like, that's your responsibility. You're his dad now, from now on. And again, eventually we get down to the 19 to 22-year-old kids that are, kind of maybe more excited about this type of leadership than a 35-year-old man might be. But you've still got to get the buy-in on their end. And so, like you said, I think the expectations up front, you have to show them as a leader. I'm proud of this example. We had a great year, my first season at the University of Houston, 13-1. And so Houston offered me a new contract with a significant raise. And I said, great, that I'm honored, I'm flattered. Now that I know you have that money, because you just offered it to me, take $500,000 of it and put it in my assistant coach's pool, because I am nothing without these guys. And so I think when guys see that, like, maybe they didn't know, they knew they got a raise, right? Word spreads, like when something like that happens, right? And so you've got, I'm not telling any leader out there to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of dollars out of their pocket, but it is an example of the sacrifices maybe that you need to make early to pay the dividends later, in terms of keeping quality talent, in terms of them, maybe when you are hard on them, remembering how well you treated them in other areas. And so, not that money is the ultimate motivator, it's just an example of when they see you bending over backwards for them, then everything that you're telling them to do, they're seeing through that lens, so just easier that way, I think, than if they see it through a lens of this management performance. They got to see it through the lens of a relationship. Like they can't, it can't be, I can't miss my quota this month. It's got to be, I can't let Jeff down this month. And there's a difference, a big difference.
Yeah. Last question.
Yes.
Have you ever had an assistant coach that, you had high hopes, they bring them on, and then they're just not what you expected, like just completely, and I'm just curious if you had any stories like that, how was that, what did you have, what's your mindset when you come across that situation? Because I think that's also very common. It's like you have these high stakes positions, and you bring people in with high expectations for them, or maybe you already assumed you knew or you've seen something, but then they get in it, and it's just not the right fit or not, like what is the right process in your mind from that point? Because a lot of leaders just hang on and just try to fix, like what happened with you?
Well, the first one, you got to take ownership of it, right? It's not that person's fault that they're in your organization doing a bad job. It's that person's fault that they're doing a bad job. It's your fault that they're in the organization if you brought them there, right? Sure. And so I think we have to own that, right? If I hire all my assistant coaches, right? I mean, nobody's like just thrust on me. So I get, this may not apply if you inherit, some employees, but past this part will apply. But on the front end, if it eventually becomes a mistake that you have to get rid of, you have to do a deep dive into how you got fooled or how you got, to make sure that that doesn't happen again on your end, right? Because obviously you made the mistake by bringing that person here, because that person couldn't or wouldn't do the job the way that you wanted it done. Now, if you have a person that's there that you weren't able to do maybe some of the research on the front end, and you have them, right? And you've got to lead them. I think that's where then those hard conversations, hey, person, I'm trying to get to know you. Let's go have lunch. You really dive into that person. You don't want to throw them away right away. Because again, you brought that person has your name on it. When they fail, you fail. Again, if you didn't bring them in though, you were put in charge of that person. Like if they fail, they still have your name on it, right? Just like a team. I didn't recruit every one of the players that, when we showed up to any of the places that we showed up, but we were expected to win with them. And so the same would be true of executives, right? Like nobody cares who hired them. You're expected to win with them. And so if you have exhausted all of those avenues of education, of relationship, of connection, of, all of the things that would go into harboring change, I guess, the biggest thing to me is effort. Right? If you are getting effort reciprocated on the other person's end, then you have a chance. But at some point, if it becomes a one-sided street and there's no effort coming back, then you got to admit your losses, but you better make sure if it comes to that point, you do an autopsy on yourself and your hiring processes or your onboarding processes, education processes, whatever led you to be in charge of that person, right? Let's figure out where that went wrong because somebody with your name on it was just told they weren't good enough. And so we got to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Sure. Which of the 4 authors is your favorite?
Next question.
Perfect. We're done. We're done here.
Okay.
Tom, really special to sit with you here today. I mean, I know in a nutshell, our story is like a Muhammad-centric story, and a Muhammad and you story for that matter. But I don't know, it's funny, when we started doing this work, which again is kind of an accident, we fell into it. We would travel the world starting to talk about our story, and our story it starts with you. And so everywhere we go, we would share the story. And the way we used to do it originally is we would bring that clip of that press conference. Nowadays, he just says it.
Right. He's got it memorized.
Literally, audiences around the world have sat and watched that clip of your press conference. But the fun fact is that every time we go there, there's a lot of setup. We got a lot of AV and tech. And so we'd always need to test all the systems again and again in different ways before different setups. And the way we test to make sure it works is to play a video. And because your video comes first in our sequence, I've watched you. So when I met you, I was like, oh my God, it's him. It's the guy who just haunts my dreams with a replay of the same press conference over. I could just picture it. But I say all that to say that it is really crazy to meet you after over a decade, because the impact that you had, yes, was started with Muhammad, but because of how it completely shifted the narrative for all of us, the way we talk to each other, the way we even do work is we want to be a high-performing sports team, not just family or friends or love. We really went hard in that direction. That always had you in the backbone of that. And it's just so funny because we would do this work and we started writing a book, and the first chapter was the easiest thing to put together was Tom Herman, and it's just this no-brainer for us. But to kind of put it all together in today, and kind of full circle moment for me, because it's one of those things we used to joke all the time. It's I wonder if Tom out there, whatever he's doing, knows that there's just these random dudes whose lives have completely shifted because of it. And I know you've said before, it was a press conference, and you said what's on your mind, your heart, which is why it worked, because it was real. But you never ever realize just the impact you have in a moment, because to us it was a tectonic shift in our lives. And so I guess I say all that to say I'm really grateful. Like, I'm truly grateful, because the work we've done isn't just work to me. You can ask my wife, you can ask my friends, my family, like, it's changed the way that I even kind of go through life. Like, I look at things really differently, and I'm not saying that's all because of that one press conference, but the ripple effect of starting there and then recognizing, and I've done so much introspection since, I've done so much work with myself, and the way I want to be a father is influenced by my mindsets through this. And so I'm not playing it up when I say that you have had a significant and really critical impact on my personal life. And I thought I could use this opportunity to let you know that. And I mean that from the very, very bottom of my heart.
I appreciate that. I mean, I'm humbled. It's surreal to me to know. I'm embarrassed that it took us 10 years to connect, to be honest with you. I'm sure a lot of that was on my end somewhere. But the fact that we have, and the fact that the book is, I could never have written a book that's written, both books. Like, the way that you've organized and put it into a curriculum, a digestible, like, I never would have visioned kind of something that maybe comes natural to me, and it's just the way I was coached, and so I just kind of thought it was the way, kind of the best way to do things. And then to know that it spawned these beautiful books and this beautiful way of change and doing things in the business world is humbling, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.